We reduced the deficit in the first 2 years by $1.7 trillion.
Well, the dollar will never lose the dollar standard. Are they kidding?
The economy of the United States was supposed to experience some drastic downfall as of recent times. However, in the face of this economic uncertainty, the United States has deployed a series of strategic measures to ward off recession. But what are these innovative tactics and policies that have kept the nation's economy strong and resilient? Get ready to discover how the United States is preventing the tragedies of a recession, one bold step at a time. Believe it or not, Wall Street is still prepared for an eventual recession. This is partly due to customers' intentions to reduce their expenditure. The expenditure slowdown in March was quite significant, but it's not all negative news. It doesn't seem like the situation is getting worse very quickly, but there is a slowdown. However, if consumers continue to spend, a recession might never happen. I still believe it's possible that this time is truly different, and the reason is that the labor market is truly experiencing such an excess of demand. I guess, the consumer has been resilient to this inflationary shock. The consumer still has a lot of power. Put simply, they spend differently. People continue to spend money, and the economy has benefited from that. It seems like we've been discussing the likelihood of a recession for a very, very long time. In addition, the world economy is now holding strong. However, some people are cutting back on spending. I dislike setting money aside, and that contributed to the issue. I enjoy splurging. Due to the fact that we live in a consumer economy, I had the impression that many individuals would have a similar experience. How long can consumers continue to support the US economy? If inflation remains high, many Americans are revising their spending plans. The truth is that as prices rise, everything you must pay on a daily basis, rent, a mortgage, utilities, and food, increases dramatically. 4 out of 5 respondents to a study conducted in February 2023 claimed that they were reducing spending by buying less in bulk or shopping around more frequently for better offers. The rate of economic growth is steadily impacted by these kinds of little choices. More than half of the economy is made up of consumer expenditure. It's very almost 70%. In most cases, high consumer spending is sufficient to prevent the economy from entering a recession. It's a tiny bit less in Europe. Exports are a far bigger generator of economic activity than they may be, for example, right here in the US. When we turn our attention to China or other Asian countries, the industrial sector becomes even more crucial. So certainly, the US stands out in terms of how crucial consumers are to the state of the economy as a whole. It's possible this increased consumer spending is keeping inflation high. The headline inflation rate soared above the Federal Reserve's 2% goal in March 2021. On April the 20th, 2023, the inflation rate was still quite near 5%. People's pace is only now starting to slow down as a result of rising costs. Even if consumer spending is slowing, they still have a financial cushion. Because individuals still have the money in their bank accounts, the process might be gradual. The first quarter's GDP growth rate at the end of 2023 was 1.1%. Although not detrimental, this increase is insufficient to completely rule out the likelihood of a recession. Here's something that's going on in the background. What they buy is changing among consumers. During lockdowns, people made significant purchases of tangible objects, while today consumers are spending the most on services. This is a higher income consumer when you look at where the spending is occurring, especially when you look at travel, leisure, and entertainment. Many consumers continue to be willing to spend money on experiences, according to McKinsey. Other spending categories like dining out and clothing are also increasing, but so are essentials. I never really gave a thought about how much food costs. It's so strange for me to be experiencing it when it comes to meals. What motivates consumer spending, do you know? Either your ability to access credit or your income, I guess. Recognize that's all you have, or you risk depleting your funds. All three of those pressures are going to be present. Even if there isn't a recession, many American homes will experience a difficult economic era. According to economists, those with less money may use credit to pay bills in this economy. I find it quite concerning how heavily individuals rely on credit in order to buy things they require on a daily basis. The Bank of America Institute data collection demonstrates that sentiment. Credit utilization is important to us because we want to know how indebted the consumer is. They may spend their existing funds, or they may borrow to finance their purchases by means of the pandemic. The trend of Americans utilizing credit less is beginning to change. The typical household owed almost $10,000 on credit cards by the end of 2022. Analysts predict the national credit card debt may soon reach an all-time high of $1 trillion. Using credit for daily needs is extremely risky because we're all aware that credit card interest rates have been growing along with interest rates overall. Is the interest you're paying on the money you're actually borrowing to cover the daily costs? Interest rates on credit cards are at an all-time high, surpassing 20% nationally in February. Depending on the federal funds rate set by the central bank, these interest rates go up and down, and only consumers with a monthly balance are typically subject to these costs. Other areas of the economy are also showing danger flags as customers face obstacles. Since a few major banks recently failed, there has been a lot of suspicion. This can result in credit being reduced, and you do. Banks are growing increasingly anxious. Some of these small and regional banks have experienced a limited amount of deposit flight. I believe that the combination of increasing borrowing costs and more difficult credit availability, or a double pincer movement on the American home and corporate sector, has the potential to be extremely worrying and detrimental to chances for growth. While the majority of consumers are doing well, the economy remains divided. Strong asset growth, especially in housing in the US, may be the primary driver for this demand. Since 2020, home prices have increased nationwide by more than 30%. A home is owned by around 2/3 of US households. According to economists, these rises in house prices may enhance consumer spending. You could be interested in a home equity line of credit if you actually have equity in your house. You can borrow money using the value of your home as collateral. However, there are hazards associated with home equity lines of credit as well, particularly depending on how interest rates develop. Remember that you are borrowing money in this situation. Therefore, there will be interest rates for the sum of money you are borrowing. To ensure you can still afford to live in your property, it's something to think about, but to examine very carefully. According to the Federal Reserve, those interest rates will remain higher for a longer period of time. With the deed of today, in a little over a year, we increased interest rates by 5 percentage points. Our tightening of policy is having an impact on demand. However, it will take some years before the complete impacts of monetary restriction will be felt, particularly with regard to inflation. Everybody's financial situation is tighter when interest rates rise, but notably for those without assets. Since 40 years ago, interest rates have been rising at their fastest and most aggressive rate. Everybody can feel it in their pockets. There may be further factors affecting Americans. In comparison to 2022, the average tax refund in 2023 is smaller. This may limit the spending power of families with middle-class incomes. The fact that lower income cohorts continue to have the highest salary levels and wage growth among all income cohorts, however, is a promising development. And now, if you consider the higher income groups in the other end of the income range, our data shows that their salary levels are declining, right? Even while their current paycheck may be less than it was a year ago, their bank savings have likely grown significantly over time, so they're not experiencing so much of a drawdown. In light of these two elements taken together, I believe there are challenges for people at both ends of the income spectrum. However, there is another countervailing aspect that offers them additional protection. As of May 2023, the top economists have not proclaimed a recession, but some do observe the beginnings of a slowdown. If you consider the post-COVID recovery as a period that has been ascending into the atmosphere, I believe it's currently losing momentum. Although it hasn't started to slow down yet, I believe there is no doubt that there are bigger headwinds. I don't believe that we're currently experiencing a recession, and the labor market's current strength is certainly the main factor in it. Many of those available positions have been filled, businesses like food and hospitality too. Whether employers can afford to give these employees a living wage may determine the direction the economy takes in the future. Things aren't as good as they might have been in terms of money. You know, there was a time when income disparity may have decreased. However, it now appears that those who have money are once again in a lot better position than those who are unluckily battling a little more. I believe that a lot of folks are still making ends meet. Therefore, this is not anguish that only a few people experience financially. No matter how much money they make, it affects the majority of Americans. And with that, we close today's video. What are your opinions on this? Feel free to let us know in the comment section down below. If you've enjoyed today's video, make sure you give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel so you never miss out on all the amazing content we can bring you.